Remember, you cannot use variables when setting the name and the player ID here. You have to set it manually like this, or you have to copy it up over and over. It's a bit of a pain, especially if you want to use multiple banks or something, whatever. To store it, you just use this store here that you can find in the bank. You have to have opened the bank first before you can store something to it. You can see what types of things you can store. You can store booleans, integers, points, etc., units even. And you have to save bank to save it. When you store a unit, it doesn't store the unit position, it just stores the unit type. So it doesn't store any items the unit has or anything, so you have to store that yourself. After you store the key, you have to save it for the next time the map is open. And to load keys, you can quite simply use this load integer value or whatever. To access it, you need a variable. So if I make a unit type variable, oops, unit. If I double click here, function, bank, you will see, alright, last restored unit, bad example. But you can load, let's make it a point then. Units are a bit different, I'm not gonna go over them right now. Bank, load the point value. So I can load a point from a bank. Alright, that ends the how to use banks part of this tutorial. Now we're going to talk about some limitations of banks. The first annoying limitation, as I said, is the no ability to use these variables here, but that's easy to get around. A more annoying limitation is that you can only load about 80 keys out of a bank in multiplayer games, total for all players. This means that if you have 10 players in your game, you can only load 8 values per player, or the game will not load. It just won't start. So that's kind of a problem, but you can work around it by saving your stuff cleverly. There are many, well, programmers have used this for ages. When storage space was limited, they had to come up with clever ways of saving data. I will show you 2 basic ways to do it here. And there are way more ways you can do it, a lot more clever ways, but these 2 ways are very basic. The first one I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a new action here. New action definition. Bang, save boolean data. Now this way of saving something only works with true or false values. So it can only have one of 2 states, the data that you save. Setting 1, setting 2, setting 3, but you can setting 4, but you can save as many settings as you want almost in a single integer value in your bank. So if you have a lot of well, true or false settings, you can use this method. The way you do it is you summarize if then else, simple if then else here. I'll type it out first and then I'll explain it after. I think that will be easier. So I'm going to take parameter 1 if it's equal to true. I'm going to add bank while here. Then not set variable but modify variable. Variable bankval +1, and just copy this one up. Setting 2 equal to true, modify bankval +2. Setting 3, if you're a programmer, you probably know approximately what I'm doing here. 4, and for setting 4, +8. And then we simply put it into our bank at the end here. Store integer. Value is going to be our bank vault. Key is Boolean data key. There, doesn't really matter what it's called. Keys, Boolean data key, and section, bank sections. Not last open banked, but player banks. We don't have a parameter. Player ID. Player ID. And then finally we have to save the bank. So save bank. Alright. So if you don't know how this works, it might look a bit strange. But the idea here is that the sum of every value from the start here is the sum of every value before is less than the next one. So 1 is less than 2. 2 plus 1 will be 3. 1 plus 2 plus 4 will be 7. So when you load this out, what you do is you start at the back here, the one that's 8. So you take the sum that you load out of the bank, which if all settings are set, it will be 8 plus 4 plus 2 plus 1, which should be 15. And you will check, can I subtract 8 from, is it larger than 8? Is the first thing you will check. If it's larger than 8, that means that this setting was true, that we added 8 to it. Because if it wasn't larger than 8, or if this setting wasn't true, it couldn't be possibly larger than 8. Because then it could only be 7 maximum. Then you will subtract 8 from the sum. And let's just go in here and do a load. And you will see it actually. It might be easier. Alright, so we don't need these. So we're gonna do it. So let's assume that we load our bank variable here. Load integer value, key. Our key. Section. Our section. And finally bank. Don't forget to set up the bank. I did that in my own map and I banged my head against the wall for freaking 20 minutes before I figured out that I had last created bank in one of my triggers and it was a pain. Anyway, so we have bank wall, our variable. So we take bank wall. If it's larger than or equal to, 8. Then we know that, I'm just going to delete the other things here. If it's larger or equal to 8, then we know that we had setting 4 set when we put it in. So we subtract 8 from it, and then we do our action. I'm not going to do anything, but let's assume we have, not action, comment. Where's my comment? Setting 4 was true. Alright? So next step up, we add another one, and we check if it's larger than 4, which was the next value. If it is, we subtract 4, and that means setting 3 was true. Once again, larger than 2, and that means setting 2 was true. And finally, if it's larger or equal to 1, that means